I love Jujutsu Kaisen. I picked it up rather recently, and already I think it's one of the best shonen out there. For those who don't know, Jujutsu Kaisen, or JJK, focuses on Jujutsu High first-year sorcerer Yuji Itadori as he battles his way through Jujutsu society. Now, the role of the Jujutsu sorcerer is to exorcise things called cursed spirits, or curses, which are conscious beings who are essentially manifestations of the bad vibes feeding off of humans. Within the series, it's usually a given that these guys are evil and need to be exorcised or killed by the sorcerers. The story of JJK takes these concepts and manages to tell many stories regarding the questionable nature of an organization like Jujutsu Society, the death of innocence forced responsibility can result in, what it's like to live in liminality, and, the focus of this video, what it means to live in a world where morals and values are pushed upon subjects and opposed against others. In particular, I believe this is best exemplified by the relationship between Yuji Itadori and Mahito during the series' Shibuya incident arc. This video is going to give a brief rundown of the tenets of existentialism before diving into an existential analysis of the JJK world and its characters Yuji Itadori and his sworn enemy, the cursed spirit, Mahito. Existentialism is the philosophical school of thought that rests on the foundation of a slogan stating existence precedes essence. For those wondering, this essentially means that nothing is intrinsic to human beings before they are born. Who we are is determined once we exist in this world. Because of the idea that we are nothing before we exist, existentialists believe that nothing is objective or standard. Everything is subjective. There are no concrete/universal morals, personalities, character, or outlook. There is nothing about ourselves or our existence that intrinsically has meaning. Everything we are and everything we value is the result of a conglomeration of everything we've experienced as individuals throughout our existence. And it's because of this that each and every one of us are free to choose who we are and make our own meanings of our lives. This leads to the idea of existentialism as a moral framework, which states that individual freedom ought to be prioritized. Freedom in this instance is going to be defined as the unrestriction to determine who and what we are. Existentialism as a moral theory says that we should live unrestricted by others and do what we can to live others to live unrestricted. That is the only thing that can truly determine what is right and what is wrong. Now, before getting into some anime analysis, I would like to go over some pretty nifty existentialist terms and tools that are used to engage with its concepts. And this is, of course, only some existentialism terms, and a lot of these are incredibly simplified for a general audience. The first, and debatably the most important for this video, is the idea of absurdity, which simply refers to when someone tries to make meaning in a meaningless world. This goes along the idea of bad faith, which refers to when one learns that they live in a meaningless world, but lie to themselves in an attempt to believe that there is a grander meaning of existence. Next up is the idea of authenticity, which is when one accepts the idea that they are free to make their own meanings, even though it is absurd to do so. Probably the most complex thing in this video is the role the other plays in one's existence. By other, I'm referring to someone who is not yourself. The role other people play in one's existence is an intricate conversation, but for the sake of simplicity, all you need to know is that the existence of someone is determined and can be affected by the view of other people. Although I am the subject of my own existence, my existence is determined by others I perceive and others who perceive me. You are a subject of your own existence, but your existence is determined by your own perceptions of others and others who perceive you. For example, I would call myself a YouTuber because there are other people who watch my content. Or, I exist as a student because there exists another individual in relation to myself who is not a student, being my professors. Predators are defined by how they exist in relation to prey, and vice versa. This leads to the idea of sedimentation, which states that ideas and ideals only matter insofar as they are supported by the thoughts of the subject. This relates to others as they can assign traits on the subject that the subject can then accept as being parts of themselves. The final thing I want to mention is Simone de Beauvoir's 5 personalities that relate to existentialism. These categories cover how individuals wrestle with the subjective nature of existence and along with that, the freedom to determine who and what they are. I'll go over why these things are important as we go along. First, and lowest on the rung, is what Beauvoir calls the subhuman. The subhuman is someone who recognizes the nature of their existence, but instead of prioritizing their freedom and the freedom of others, they fall into apathy and inaction. Second is the serious human, who has values and ideals, but does not question them and regard them as being literal and objective, and thus they are contradicting the subjective nature of existentialism and are living in the absurd. Thirdly, there's the concept of nihilism and the nihilist. Nihilism is the philosophy of meaningless, stating that nothing matters no matter what. Although it's a branch of existentialism, as in it accepts the idea that existence precedes essence, it differs in that it does not prioritize nor care about anything, because at the end of the day, we're all just dust in the wind. Nihilists exercise their freedom by rejecting the positives of freedom, and even sometimes destroy the freedom of others. The fourth is the adventurer, who, once they find out the subjective nature of their existence, they experience the joys of life unrestricted by conventional values. This is the only one I won't be referring to that much in this video. The final type is the passionate human, who lives through their connections to others. This one differs from the serious human in that they themselves are the one who invest the value in what they love and live for. We see that this relates to both authenticity and sedimentation. And that's enough amateur philosophy. Let's get into the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, which I believe masterfully applies these concepts. To start, let's look at the world of Jujutsu Kaisen and Jujutsu Society. In the world of JJK, something that's rather assumed by most sorcerers is the idea that curses exist, they are evil, and that they need to be stopped. This is seen rather blatantly from the beginning, as they can be seen hurting people and are the supernatural explanation of the real-world Japanese phenomenon where thousands of people go missing yearly throughout the country without explanation. Within the fictional verse itself, curses are brought into being because of the negativity that builds up from humans. That negativity then gets personified, resulting in a cursed spirit, giving them this evil/bad disposition. Since this is the case, and since we know that sorcerers are the ones who stop the curses and protect the weak, the natural conclusion to come to is that the sorcerers are the good guys of the series. For the most part, curses have no say in this matter, as they typically lack some form of consciousness and seem to be much more akin to animals. And here we can already see the idea of sedimentation and that the subject's existence is defined by the other. The existence of cursed spirits literally stems from humans, but they are also conceived as being intrinsically evil beings by those around them, since there are instances in which they cause harm to normal humans. Meanwhile, sorcerers are defined as the good ones that need to fend off and defeat curses to protect the weak, and thus are intrinsically good. This, of course, is the dominant narrative recognized by sorcerers and is the one widely accepted, given that cursed spirits typically lack the cognition to argue against this or conceptualize their own existence. Yuji believes the sorcerer narrative that curses need to be defeated, given that he believes Jujutsu sorcerers help people who are in need, which aligns with his wider goal, which is to help guide people to a proper death. We see that he cares deeply about protecting the innocent and doing what's right. To meet this end, he needs to get stronger and exercise as many curses as possible. It's my belief that at the beginning of the series, we can see that Yuji is displaying Beauvoir's second personality type, the serious human. This is because he decides to accept these dominant narratives and concrete moral values. This idea of curses being evil and sorcerers being good goes widely uncontested until the disaster curses are brought into the picture. Disaster curses are cursed spirits of specific fears of broad, abstract concepts. Because these curses are fueled by more fear and hatred, they are capable of higher cognition and can contemplate who they are and their place in the world. One of these is the cursed spirit Jogo, who is the personification of the fears and dreads surrounding volcanoes and fire. The reason why I give such a hefty exposition dump here is because Jogo explains how this dynamic between humans and curses ought to be flipped, given that curses are the result of true human feelings, making their existence more authentic than that of humans who live in a world of lies. We see that Jogo believes that since he and other curses exist in a realm of truth, they should be the ones to rule the world and humans should be wiped out. And now, we can introduce Mahito, the disaster curse who acts as the antithesis to this good/bad dichotomy we see in Jujutsu Kaisen, and one of the most memorable antagonists from the series. Mahito is a disaster curse similar to Jogo. His origin stems from fear and hatred humans feel towards themselves and fellow humans. But even conceptually, there's much more to this character than that. Mahito has an ability to match his origin, as we learned during his introduction that he is capable of seeing human souls as if they were a material object. It's this capability of his that leads him to the existential mantra, as, to him, he knows there is no mysticism of existence. The soul is just another object, as if it were an arm or a leg. The operations of existence are no longer some abstract concept that need to be protected and prioritized. Rather, it's just some ordinary object that can be changed and manipulated at his whim. It's because of this that we see Mahito as nihilistic and thus is displaying Beauvoir's third personality type. He accepts the fact that there's nothing intrinsically special to human existence, but instead of prioritizing their freedom to gain meaning, he refuses to live in absurdity and concludes that their lives don't matter. Along with this, Mahito has the terrifying ability known as soul transfiguration, where he can change the shape of the human soul, turning people into abominations who would typically die shortly afterwards. Although this is the case, we see that Mahito doesn't disregard desires, freedom, and meaning entirely. It's just that the only freedom he cares about is his own. He believes that the role of a curse is to live out their own impulses regardless of how vile they seem to be. He views human values like morals and other relationships simply as coping mechanisms for them to deal with living in a meaningless existence. All of this put together results in Mahito killing others with no regard to his actions and being rather torturous to those who oppose him, because those who do mean nothing. So what happens when this optimistic protagonist, opting in for the dominant moral narrative and acting on what is right, meets this nihilistic being hell-bent on exerting his own freedom regardless of how many he effortlessly kills in the process? Our first glimpse of an answer to this question is when the two of them encounter at a school. To sum up a rather complicated storyline, Mahito tricks a normal guy named Junpei into befriending Yuji. This is so Mahito can inevitably kill Junpei to enrage Yuji. This actually works, and we see Yuji get really mad, to the point that he ends up swearing that he'll kill Mahito, the first time he swears to end the life of any character up until this point. The two then fight with both of them coming close to death. The encounter ends with both Mahito and Yuji surviving and getting away. This encounter has lasting effects on both characters. For Yuji, we see that Mahito becomes his motivation to get stronger, and his evil deeds act as a reinforcement for his beliefs that his motivations are the correct ones. Yuji believes that in the end, Mahito is and always will be a curse. Curses are evil, and they need to be stopped. Conversely, we see that Mahito actually gains a twinge of motivation, as being brought to the brink of death brings him the desire to enjoy himself whenever he's put in such a situation. And now, we've set the stage to bring in the Shibuya incident. This is where Mahito and Yuji have their final showdown. Before this, though, we see that Yuji goes through the ringer. His teacher gets sealed away, he gets his ass kicked, his other teacher dies before his very eyes by Mahito's hand, and he ends up blaming himself for being responsible for the deaths of thousands. Understanding that he's near his breaking point, Mahito comes along and kills Yuji's comrade, Nobara, which finally breaks Yuji's resolve. It's from here where Mahito reveals his truth. He says that there was no point in entering this battle with some flippant amount of self-determination, as this is not a battle for what's right and wrong. It's a clash of truths. He says, "You are me, Yuji Itadori. I kill without a second thought, just like how you save people without a second thought. How the hell did you think you were gonna beat me when you didn't even realize that? Tell me, Yuji Itadori, have you ever stopped to count how many curses you've killed? No, right? Me neither. Me neither. Like I care about how many people I've killed. I'm sure I'll eventually forget about you too." Now, to sum it up, what Mahito is telling us here is that Yuji is living in absurdity. These moral notions that are regarded as truths are ones that are hypocritical and contradictory to reality, as Mahito reveals that the sorcerers are acting just as the curses. The only difference is who's preconceived to be right and who's preconceived to be wrong. And surprisingly, Yuji accepts this. He accepts this and breaks down. After getting saved by his brother Todo, he tells Todo that he's nothing but a murderer, and what was once his conviction was just an excuse for his murderous actions. This scene highlights Yuji regressing from the serious human to the subhuman. After coming to accept the absurdity of his moral resolve, he devolves into nothing at all. He's directionless. And as we'll soon see, this is the first step of Yuji reaching authenticity. But before we dive into Yuji's authenticity, let's talk about the authenticity of a character I've neglected to mention until now. Aoi Todo, the ideal embodiment of what it means to be a Jujutsu sorcerer. Todo rushes in to save Yuji and sees him in the state he's in, understanding that Yuji is grappling with the fact that his whole motivation for existence is nothing but a lie he's been telling himself. And Todo tells him not to think so narrow-minded. He says, "Brother, we are Jujutsu sorcerers. You and I, all of our allies, are together. We are Jujutsu sorcerers. As long as we live, our friends who've passed away will not truly be defeated. It's not about the sins or punishment. The moment we become sorcerers, our lives cannot be limited to such misfortunes. Looking for meaning or logic in death can at times defile the memories of those we lost. Even so, What have you been entrusted with? You don't need to answer right now. However, until you find your answer, never stop moving. Now, this scene implies to me that Todo understands what Yuji is confronting and tells him that his own motivation is to fight for what he's been entrusted with. It is my belief that Todo is Beauvoir's fifth personality type, the passionate human. That meaning and conclusion he's come to might not mean much in the grander scheme of things, but to constantly question the meaning or logic of life and death is to limit your own existence. We see that Todo has confronted the contradictory nature of meaning making, and yet despite that, found true motivation to keep moving. And he encourages Yuji to keep moving as well, even if he has yet to reach that state. And we see that Yuji does. He accepts that he was about to run away from his sins as compared to confronting them. He decides to take on the suffering of those he's lost, taking his next step towards both authenticity and the last act of the Shibuya incident. Through the final battle with Mahito, we see Yuji regain his resolve. We see he and Todo put the hurt on Mahito as the three of them get stronger as they fight, unlocking new heights. The fight is tense, with Todo going down, but giving Yuji the last push he needs to defeat Mahito once and for all. But before Mahito meets his end, Yuji tells him that he was right. He says, "I am you. I wanted to reject you, convince myself that you were wrong, but that doesn't matter now. I'm gonna kill you. Even if you come back as another curse, I'll kill you. Change your name, change your form, I'll kill you again. I don't need to find a meaning or a reason. Maybe 100 years after my death, the meaning behind my actions will become apparent. In the grand scheme of things, I'm probably nothing more than a cog. But I'll keep killing curses for as long as I can fulfill that role." Here, we can see Yuji revealed that he was living in bad faith. He says that Mahito was right. The differences between the two of them are non-existent. Both of them kill without a thought and have their own reasons behind it. And in Yuji's case, this reason was a moral one. Coming to understand this, we see that instead of denying this part of himself, Yuji accepts it. He accepts the meaningless nature of his existence and yet is declaring his own purpose. Reaching authenticity, evolving to the passionate human, and accepting the existential praxis that his reasons for moral being and defeating Mahito stem from nothing but his own personal desires and freedom to do so. In response to this, Mahito runs away. He doesn't know what to do. Living as such a nihilistic being, Mahito is the antithesis of existential moral righteousness, as he has defined his being as restricting and removing the freedom of others. This is to its fullest extent. Not only is he killing people, but he's literally morphing and changing the shape of the other's soul. He's determining their existence. So when this nihilistic ideals are challenged in such a manner that result in the restriction of his own freedom, he tries to run away. When put into the position he forced upon others, he becomes the prey as compared to the predator. He tries to deny reality. In sum, Mahito believed he was living in some form of authenticity until he had to face the notion of his own vulnerable existence. And this is pretty much the end of the Mahito and Yuji relationship, as Mahito meets his end shortly after. This is due to his superior, Geto, absorbing his power, as that was the next role Mahito had to fulfill in Geto's grand plan, revealing that at the end of the day, he was nothing more than a cog, just like Yuji Itadori. We see that within Jujutsu society, there's a belief that curses and sorcerers have these predisposed traits among them that state that sorcerers are good and curses are bad. For our main character, he believes this narrative until he is met by a nihilistic curse who reveals to him that these predispositions about right and wrong are absurd, as the two of them are one and the same. Upon hearing this, Yuji breaks down until he's reunited with his brother, who found meaning in the absurd world. Following this, Yuji defeats Mahito and accepts that he was right. Morality is not objective. There is no concrete right and wrong, but despite that, he must stop Mahito, which marks his transcendence into authenticity. And that was an existential examination on Jujutsu Kaisen's Shibuya incident. This was actually a college project where I had to creatively interact with concepts of existentialism, and I saw it as a perfect excuse to make a video about the morality of Jujutsu Kaisen. I can tell you right off the bat that this is not going to be the only video like this, so I hope you guys enjoyed. This level of narrative analysis is kind of new for the channel, so let me know what you guys thought of it. Let me know what you thought worked and didn't work, and give me some suggestions for the future in the comments, and thank you for watching. Some sources and citations will be in the description. Thank you.